In 1803, the fragile peace of the Treaty of Amiens dissolved, thrusting Europe back into a state of total war. Across the English Channel, Napoleon Bonaparte began assembling the Army of England, a massive force of 115,000 veterans, supported by hundreds of transport vessels, all waiting for the order to cross the narrow seas. For the British, the threat of a land invasion was a terrifying and very real possibility. While the Royal Navy maintained its legendary supremacy at sea, Britain's ground forces remained dangerously unprepared for the tactical flexibility of the French Grande Armée. To meet this existential threat, the British military turned to a trailblazing general named John Moore and a revolutionary training ground on the south coast of England. This is the story of how Britain prepared for the invasion that never was, and how those preparations birthed the most elite fighting force of the Napoleonic era.
As Napoleon's forces gathered at Boulogne, the British landscape began to transform into a fortress. Martello towers were rapidly constructed along the south coast to serve as coastal artillery outposts, and a staggering volunteer force of 380,000 men was raised by December 1803. Commanding the critical southern military district was Major General John Moore, who was tasked with the daunting responsibility of organizing the nation's first line of defense. Moore was certain that if the French landed, it would be on the stretch of coastline near Dover. His strategy was not to retreat or fight a war of attrition, but to strike hard the moment French boots hit the surf. However, Moore recognized a fatal flaw in the British Army. Its infantry were trained for static line battles and were routinely outclassed by French expert skirmishers in the broken, undulating terrain of the English countryside.
The disparity between the two armies was stark. While a British light infantryman might fire 30 ineffective shots into a hedge during a skirmish, a French chasseur would wait patiently until they saw a specific object to fire at, expending only 5 or 6 accurate rounds. To bridge this gap, Moore established the Shorncliffe training camp in late 1802. The camp itself was wet and bleak, consisting of temporary tents and earthworks, but it became the forge for a new discipline. Moore's goal was to create a soldier who was a mixture of Jaeger and grenadier, someone who possessed the marksmanship of a specialist and the discipline of a regular. He moved away from the traditional use of the cat-o'-nine-tails for punishment, fostering instead an atmosphere of mutual respect and professional ingenuity.
At Shorncliffe, Moore began converting traditional battalions into dedicated light infantry units. The Experimental Corps of Riflemen, soon renamed the 95th Rifles, were the first to arrive, bringing their iconic green jackets and Baker rifles. They were joined by the 52nd Oxfordshire and the 43rd Monmouthshire regiments, forming the core of what would become the legendary Light Division. The training was grueling and revolutionary. Officers were drilled alongside their recruits, learning to march, shoot, and skirmish with the same competency as their men. This meritocratic approach ensured that light infantry officers, who were expected to be in the thick of the action, could lead by example rather than just by rank.
The Shorncliffe system focused on marksmanship and tactical flexibility. Soldiers practiced on targets 4 to 5 feet in diameter, a size Moore and his specialists believed promoted careful aiming without discouraging the marksman. They were trained to operate in an extended order, maintaining 1.5 meters between files to maximize visibility while providing mutual support. Perhaps most importantly, they mastered the compact square. Unlike the traditional hollow square, this formation could be formed from a close column in mere seconds. While it offered fewer muskets in the front rank, it traded firepower for the speed necessary to survive a surprise cavalry charge, a tactic that would later save the British Army during the Peninsular War.
The invasion of 1803 never came, as the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805 eventually secured the Channel for Britain. However, the preparations made at Shorncliffe were not in vain. The soldiers who trained under Moore became the pride of the British Army, proving their worth on the sun-baked hills of Spain and Portugal. John Moore himself would not live to see the full fruits of his labor, falling in battle before the war's end, but his legacy lived on in the men he trained. As the Duke of Wellington later remarked, the British could never have won without the foundation laid by Moore and his elite light infantry. The threat of Napoleon's invasion had forced Britain to innovate, creating a modern soldier who could think on his feet and change the course of history. And this is just the beginning. Subscribe if you want to see how these soldiers changed the entire war.